My old high school has a very annoying problem. It wasn't bullies or mean teachers like in typical schools. My high school has a faulty fire alarm. I say has because it's still going on. Every day at precisely 10:35 in the morning, the fire alarm would activate. The alarm would sound for 6 minutes straight before stopping abruptly. It happened so often that the staff eventually learned to ignore it. I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't the school fix the alarm? The thing is, the staff had tried many times, but for some reason, nobody could fix it. Before I started my first year of high school, my older brother Jeremy told me about the fire alarm. Our parents enrolled us in that school because it's one of the best in our city. This is the sole reason why the school never closed. Like everyone in this school, I learned to ignore the busted alarm, but that soon changed during my senior year. There was an abandoned classroom on the third floor. It used to be a place that held shop classes until a fire broke out. At the time, I didn't know if anyone was hurt during that incident. One of my classes that year was in a classroom right next to the abandoned one. This class took place during the alarm glitch. One day, while the alarm sounded, I left class to go to the nurse's office. I had a headache and was in desperate need of aspirin. I'd passed the abandoned classroom when I smelled something. It was smoke coming from that very classroom. The door had been locked since the fire. I figured that another student must have broken in to smoke. I'm not one to snitch, so I left it alone. Later that day, I was having lunch with my friends when one of them mentioned the smoke coming from the abandoned classroom. Mason, another friend, claimed that it was the ghost of Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz was the school's shop teacher. He was in the classroom when the fire broke out. Unfortunately, when the first responders arrived, Mr. Ortiz was already dead. The fire started at 10:35 a.m. Mr. Ortiz was trapped in the classroom for 6 minutes until he died of smoke inhalation. There are rumors that Mr. Ortiz's ghost was messing with the fire alarm. Some students claim to have smelled smoke coming from the abandoned classroom while the alarm sounded. I tensed when I heard that. Before we parted ways, Mason proposed that we break into the classroom to look for the ghost. I went along with it to prove to myself that there was no ghost. None of us had the same class for that hour, so we could ask for hall passes without raising suspicion. The four of us agreed to meet at the abandoned classroom at 10:34 a.m. We carried on with our plan the following day. Lisa, a girl in our friend group, picked the classroom's lock. We went inside and waited for the fire alarm to activate. When it did, my friends and I were met with the odor of smoke. A raspy gasp then startled us. We all instinctively turned around, wondering what made that noise. I felt my heart sink to my feet as I saw what it was. A heavy-set man with red, charred skin was shambling around in the classroom. He repeatedly heaved as he made his way towards us. Smoke came out of his mouth every time it opened. His soulless eyes were barely visible behind the cracked lens of his glasses. Mason grabbed my arm before I could process what I was witnessing, and we ran out of the classroom. I don't remember what happened after that, as I was still in shock. I can tell you that my friends and I got detention for cutting class. That evening, my parents sat me down. I was sure that I was going to get lectured and even grounded, but instead, my dad tearfully told me a story. He was a freshman in my school when he took Mr. Ortiz's class. Mr. Ortiz was a strict teacher who yelled at his students over the slightest mistake. No matter how hard his students tried, they couldn't get more than a C+ from Mr. Ortiz. And with each criticism from his teacher, my dad got gradually sicker of him. One day, Dad and his friends decided to play a prank on Mr. Ortiz. His classroom was full of wood. Some of it was just lying around in the classroom. There was a period in the school day when Mr. Ortiz didn't have a class to teach. He used this spare time to nap at his desk. Dad had this idea to light one of the wooden planks with a lighter. Mr. Ortiz kept a fire extinguisher near him, so my dad wasn't too worried about the consequences. Dad and his friends snuck into Mr. Ortiz's classroom and spotted a plank propped up near the door. Dad lit the plank with his lighter before they all ran off. Apparently, the smell of smoke woke up Mr. Ortiz. He grabbed his fire extinguisher and ran to the fire. However, Mr. Ortiz tripped and landed on the concrete floor. He was knocked out, and the fire began to spread. You already know what happened next. The school didn't have CCTV cameras back then, and everyone else was in class. Dad and his friends kept silent out of fear. When the school reopened, the fire alarm suddenly went off. The school staff tried to turn it off, but to no avail. When it stopped, everyone blamed it on technical difficulties. But then the fire alarm turned itself on again the following school day. It wasn't until the third time around that Dad realized something horrifying. The alarm sounded at 10:35 a.m., the exact time Dad and his friends pulled that deadly prank. Even after this revelation, he still refused to come clean. I didn't get punished afterward. My friends and I decided not to tell anyone what we saw that day. No one would have believed us anyway. It's been years since all this happened, but every time I hear a fire alarm, I think of Mr. Ortiz and his tragic end.